says it's being live streamed.
Okay, there we are. So it's talking on my phone.
You are live.
Oh, there we are. I got so
You are.
okay, so sorry guys, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties trying to figure this out, but so thank you for those that are on. We yesterday, me and Heather did a little study on Mark chapter 5, 25 through 34. It's the woman with the infirmities, so the bleeding issue. So as we were going through this, we were discussing exactly what it takes to be healed, right? So with her, she fought through the crowds, right, to get to Christ. And what I found interesting is that she had went to all of these doctors that she spent all of her money. So she had nothing, right? And I'll let Heather talk about what that looks like on a law side of all of this. But so she ended up going through all of these things. She didn't have any money left. She had been dealing with this for 12 years and it actually was getting worse. So she went to the doctors for help and she did all of these things and nothing was working for her. So she was in desperation. And that's what I found super interesting about this is that she was absolutely desperate for this healing. So there comes a point in healing when you have to decide how badly that you want to be free from this. Um n- Not because healing is something that you can force. We can't force ourselves to heal from something if we don't understand where it come from. And so part of healing is going back to figure out where you first were hurt at, where your mind automatically goes back to when you have created these situations where these become your comforts. So, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But so it's not because you didn't pray hard enough. It's not because the pain really doesn't exist. It really is there. And these are really issues that she was facing and that sometimes we all face. But we have to get to this point in healing where we have to learn to tell the truth to ourselves. We have to be able to confront what we avoid. We have to be able to forgive others and forgive ourselves where we fall short within ourselves. And then we have to sometimes establish boundaries. And because of that, we have to change our patterns of behavior. Sometimes we even have to ask for help. Um, I got to stop saying, sorry, guys. So sometimes we have to even return to what is keeping, sometimes we have to return to what keeps hurting us. So, and we just end up doing that over and over again, this pattern of and cycle that we keep creating within ourselves. Um, but sometimes we have to push through the crowd, and the crowd could be anything. It could be things that we struggle with on a daily basis. It could be setting boundaries. It could be making sure that we don't go back to the same comforts that we're used to all the time. We need to be able to change those patterns. So this woman, this is why I like this story, is because this woman in Mark 5, she had this bleeding issue and she had it for 12 years. So she spent 12 years suffering. She spent 12 years searching for some kind of healing. And she spent 12 years disappointed. So every time she'd go to get something, every time she would try something different, every time she would step into hope, is what it was, hope that this doctor knew what they were doing, hope that this priest knew what he was doing, she was disappointed. So 12 years of waking up and realizing that the problem was still there is we can all relate to that. We wake up every day in the same situations and same problems and it seems like we try to do something different but nothing ever changes. But then she heard about this amazing person named Jesus and something inside her decided, I am going after my healing. Mark tells us that this woman had suffered for 12 years. She had sought help. She had spent what she had. And instead of getting better, she was actually getting worse. So, how many times had hoped that maybe this was going to work, only to be disappointed all over again? So, eventually, repeated disappointments can change the way that you think. You can stop thinking or stop asking, how can I heal? And you start thinking, maybe this is simply who I am. That happens emotionally too. When you have carried rejection for years and years and years, and you begin to believe, I'm just insecure. And when you've lived in a survival for mode for years, you begin to think that you're just an anxious person. And when you spend that time with the anxiety, you begin to believe that nothing is going to change it. So you just go around people pleasing or doing whatever, and you're like, this is just who I am. This is what I deserve. And nothing I do is ever going to change. So pain that stays long enough can begin to feel like identity. But what you're carrying for a long time does not automatically define who you are. Your wound is part of your story. It does not have to become your identity. So Mark 5:27 contains a small statement that changes everything. When she heard about Jesus, something shifted. She had already experienced this disappointment of waking up every day to something new and hoping and praying that something was going to change within her life, and nothing. And we've all been at that situation where we're so desperate for something to change that we're reaching for anything. And then just to feel like it's disappointed all over again, you get set in your mind and you get mad about it because you've tried all these things and it's not changing. So she had reasons to be skeptical, right? She had done all of these things. Somebody told her to go to the priest. She went to the priest. Somebody said, "Give me money and I'll give you this healing ointment." So she did that, and nothing changed. So she was skeptical. She had every reason to stay home. If I would have been, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, there's this person, they're going to be able to fix you." After 12 years of disappointment, I probably would have laughed in their face. Like, who are you talking about? I'm not even gonna go there. But she heard about Jesus and she decided to move forward towards him. Faith didn't mean she suddenly understood everything. Faith just moved her feet. And sometimes we think healing begins when we finally stop being afraid. Often, healing begins while we're still afraid. You don't have to feel completely ready before you're taking the next healthy step. Sometimes you simply have to decide, I am not staying here anymore. So there was a crowd surrounded Jesus. I mean, and if you read, like in Luke, it talks about it, and I think the other one was in Matthew. It talks about how huge the crowd was. There was so many people around him that he probably couldn't even, like I think about it, he's like in the sardine can of people walking through this crowd. So he was surrounded by all these people. But the woman could have looked at that crowd and been like, oh my gosh, like this anxiety is coming over. I'm not going there. And Heather, if you want to talk about like the law by how much she gave up to walk through this crowd, and what she risked doing so, because that is a huge part in this. Because sometimes when we want our healing, we have to risk something too. And what she risked was astronomical. So, Heather, if you want to go ahead and talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, so when we were studying this, I had to look up the Levitical law around it. We were both doing the study and then I was like, okay, well, I have heard that it was illegal for her to be in public because she was considered unclean during her cycle and because she was menstruating. And but I really hadn't studied it on my own. And so I went into Leviticus, and the law said that bleeding made her ceremonial unclean, and contact with her could transmit ceremonial uncleanliness. And so during that time, women were actually isolated. Anything that they touched had to be washed and clean and cleansed. Anything that they were around, they were basically isolated. If a male was in their presence, they were considered ceremonial unclean until that evening. And so I just thought that that part was pretty amazing because not just on her part in the sacrifice that she took and the step of faith that she took, because you got to think if she finally got to the point where she was like, I don't care what the law is, I am so desperate, I want help. I want to be healed. And I heard this man, Jesus, that can heal me. I am willing to sacrifice being stoned. I'm willing to sacrifice, whatever the punishment at that time could have been. She was willing to sacrifice it, but not just sacrifice herself, also the other people in her midst, because every person that she touched as she was making her way through the crowd, right? Because they said it was like a can, like, well, like Maria was saying, like a can of sardines surrounding Jesus. There were so many people. So she had to have touched other people as she was trying to make her way through the crowd, push her way through the crowd just to touch his hem. And then Jesus recognizing her, the point that he felt the energy leave him, he felt the electricity leave him. And he then called her daughter because at that point she was scared. She was like, it's scared and trembling. And she finally just laid it all out there. Like, this is why I finally did it, and just laid it all out there because she was so desperate for many years trying to get her healing. And then instead of shaming her, Jesus actually called her daughter. So in Leviticus 15, 19 through 23, it says, uh, when a woman has a discharge, and it is blood, she shall be in her menstrual impurity for 7 days. So for 7 days, they have to be isolated because they're considered unclean. And whoever touches her will be unclean until the evening. And then if you go down to Leviticus 15:31, it talks about uh it talks about keeping Israelites separate from things that make them unclean. So that way they do not die during their uncleanliness. And so like the fear mongering going around, I couldn't imagine today if people are like, oh, well, you're on your period, so you better go sit in your bedroom. And then, once I was finally off of my period, then it was like, well, we have to, bring in someone to completely sanitize the whole room because of how dirty you are. I mean, that's just kind of a shameful act, which for me, it made me think about like many things in my life that had happened, whether it was by choice or not by choice, that brought shame upon you, that made you feel so unclean, right? And whether it was, abuse that just happened to you, or perhaps circumstances that you found yourself in, just like Maria was talking about in the beginning. And Jesus overlooked all of that. So, yes, the law basically she could have been stoned to death right there on the street for not only, being in public for being unclean, but also contaminating everyone else that she touched, including Jesus.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's what I wanted to bring up is because she did sacrifice something to get there. So she could have looked at the crowd and said, oh my gosh, there's way too many people. Or maybe I'll come another day. It's too many people wanting his attention right now. I'll come back another day. And maybe she was like, I don't even deserve this healing after 12 years. So whatever it was, she could have turned away and said, I'm not doing it, but instead she pressed forward. And that raises an important question. So what is your crowd? What is it that you have to push through in order to get your healing? Is it fear of confronting your past? Some of us, I know for mine, like in my story, it's hard to say that I'm accountable to a certain area, or that maybe I'm so caught up in living in a survival mode that that's all I know. And I don't know what it looks like to be different than that. It could be that we are people pleasers and we don't know what to do if we're not doing that. And it could be just what you say to yourself. Self-hatred is huge. I mean, if you think about it and you're standing in the mirror and you're doing your hair and you're looking at yourself, what are the words that you say to yourself? Are you judging yourself? Are you looking at yourself with your imperfections instead of looking at yourself through healing and hope? It could be the fear of being alone. I know a lot of women who fear that. And so sometimes the greatest resistance comes when we begin approaching the very thing that could change us. So the question becomes, will I allow the crowd to determine how close that I get to Jesus? No one in the story carried this woman through her crowd. No one. No one helped her. She was segregated away from people in general. So she was no less, or she was one step up from leprosy. And so they had a whole island that they would put them on away from the entire population. And she was one step up from that. So, no one, absolutely no one was going to come help this woman get to Christ. But she went. That doesn't mean that we don't need people. God uses counselors and coaches and our friends and our family and doctors and pastors and support groups and community help. Is all part of our healing journey. Sometimes we have to reach out for help. I know with my friendship with Heather, like I was in a spot in my when we first, not well, we'd been friends for about 15 years. So, or we'd been friends since she was about 15. And yeah, I'm a little older than her. So, we'll just say her age. And we've been friends for a long, long time. But we got to this point in our marriage at our lowest, not our marriage, and our friendship, that we were both at our lowest and we needed each other in order to become healthy. I needed her to tell me when I was being ridiculous and to guide me through this healing process because I'd never had anybody support me in that. And just like her, she had areas in her life that I was like, what are you doing? So we needed each other, and it's okay to reach out for support. So there's some parts that we do need other people, but there are parts of your healing that nobody can do for you. Someone can have courage you establish as a boundary. There's sometimes you have to have the courage to establish boundaries. And that's okay. Someone can tell you that you have value, but you have to start believing it. Someone can help you recognize an unhealthy pattern, but you have to decide whether you will continue participating in it. And someone can help you explain forgiveness, but you have to be the one to wrestle with releasing what you're carrying. We all have a responsibility in our healing. Someone can also tell you that you have to let go of your past and that your past doesn't define you. But you have to begin to build a life that agrees with that truth. So, with the healing, if you think about the risk that the woman took and how she became uncomfortable, and that's where, what risk are you willing to take to get your healing? This woman, she probably thought long and hard about the risk that she was taking before she walked through that crowd. But she entered the crowd anyhow while dealing with a deeply personal issue. She moved towards Christ while carrying years of disappointment. And she reached out without knowing exactly what could happen. She had an idea of what could happen, but she went anyhow. Her healing and your healing requires movement. And this is important because survival often teaches us that we stay where things are predictable. This is my safe spot. This is where I feel comfortable. So this is where I'm going to stay. Even unhealthy patterns can feel safe when they're familiar. You may know a relationship is unhealthy, but fear of leaving keeps you stuck there. You may know you need boundaries, but the fear of what someone's reaction is or what they're going to think about you keeps you from speaking up. You may know you need to talk about your childhood, but fear what will surface. And I know even in my childhood, when I think about talking about what happened to me, I'm not thinking about my own self. I'm thinking about, well, is this going to hurt the person who hurt me? And so we get stuck in this protective mode of protecting the ones that hurt us in fear of what that looks like when we're set free. You may know your coping mechanism is hurting you, but you fear what you will feel without it. Familiar pain can sometimes feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. But healing often asks, are you willing to experience temporary discomfort so you can stop living in a permanent bondage? And it took us a while to figure out that was our coping mechanism did turn into bondage. I know for me, like I struggled with food. I struggled with the fact that food was the one thing I could control. Food was the thing that made me comfortable. Food didn't yell at me. It didn't judge me. It didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden one day I wake up And now it has this hold on me that I can't break free from. And it's even harder to break from that than it would be to, try to say everybody's like, oh, just diet, just all of that. But there is more to it when you are breaking old coping mechanisms so that you can step into your purpose. There's a lot that goes into figuring out why was that my coping mechanism? Why did I search for that comfort? Why was this what I chose to do? And I have to go back and figure out when that moment happened. So there is a lot of bondage that comes with these coping mechanisms that we use every day. And it could be just like isolating. I know for my friend Heather, which I'm sure she's okay with me sharing this, and I'll let her share in a minute. Like I was very outgoing and I wanted everybody to see how amazing our friendship was. And I wanted the world to just know that this was great. But Heather's coping mechanism was to isolate. This is my safe spot. And so each of us roll things differently. So what I was putting out there was like my life is perfect and all of that. But what I was seeing was this unhealthy person on the outside, and it was an outward appearance of an internal struggle that I was unwilling to face until the moment that I had to face it. It was my health and going down this road that I didn't want anymore because I got to the point in my healing that I didn't need this coping mechanism anymore. And now I had to break the addiction. And that's what it was. So, Heather, do you want to talk about yours just a little bit?
Yeah. So at the point, so my coping mechanism was definitely to isolate. I just kind of got to the point where I realized I couldn't trust anyone, right? Like that was the truth that I had at that time in my life. Um, but really, what the truth was I didn't know how to discern a healthy person versus unhealthy person. I did not know how to establish boundaries. And there's kind of this level in life, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about this enough around how sometimes you could be so stuck in this victim mindset that life just happens to you, right? And that's kind of where I was that every time I turned around and I allowed a person into my inner circle, they betrayed me, they hurt me, they sabotaged whatever. And so I had such high barriers around, which I feel like for a season God needed me to do that. I needed to put some walls up so that way I was isolated from the chaos, so that way I could discern what a healthy relationship was and what it was not, because I really did not know that. I didn't know what love was. And God really had to start working on me as far as understanding love. And love was much further than just an emotion. Love was actually an action. And that is how you judge the fruit, right? You judge the tree by its fruit. A person can proclaim, I love you, I love you, I love you, but they can hurt you so bad. And that was the one thing that I kept telling God, like, Lord, how can these people proclaim that they love me so much, but they hurt my heart so bad? Like they just destroy my heart every time I turn around. And so so there was that factor. I was very isolated. Um, I also was completely disassociated from the abuse that I had endured, not just current abuse, because I had gotten into abusive relationships, and the last relationship that I had gotten out of was severely abusive. I really didn't even realize it was abuse until Maria actually shared a testimony of someone else that she had encountered, and it was kind of like I felt my heart have empathy for that person. And it was almost like it made me realize, oh my gosh, that is my story. And that was the first time I realized that it was abuse. Um, and there was another factor that played a role where it was kind of like the final straw. As a young child, it was just kind of repeated, just these people coming in and out of my life, and they kept hurting me, whether it was through sexual abuse or just verbal abuse or neglect or, whatever it was. Uh, and I got into relationships and they were extremely unhealthy and one-sided. And um, so I just saw this pattern throughout my life that people hurt you if you allow them in, they hurt you. Um, And the final straw, I would say, which I didn't even realize it at the time, that I was actually a victim. It was like the final time that I was a victim, and I was so sick and tired of being a victim. I never had the victim mentality. I never wanted to look at myself and feel sorry for myself. I never wanted to even mourn what I was going through. I had such this fighter personality that I would just continue to fight through it. And, I even got to the point where I didn't really even care what happened to me as long as nothing happened to my loved ones or other people or my children or whatever. But there was this final event that happened about a year prior to Maria moving in, which just recently I just put the puzzle pieces together, and that was a truth that God needed me to see. And going back to the woman with the shame, I can see that, right? Like so she had so much shame placed on her because of the circumstances and the laws that they had in the land. The laws said that you are ceremonial unclean. There's something wrong with you while you are menstruating, and how dare you be around people? And that's the same thing when these things happen in our lives, is we kind of become so shameful of the things that we just want to isolate, right? Because society says that these things make you unclean. And I actually had gone out on a date with this person. I wasn't even a date. I met up with this person, and all I remember was having a drink with a person. I really don't even remember much, but he later on that night apparently ended up coming home. Things happened, and I freaked out in the middle of the night, like just completely lost it. And the next day, I felt so shameful that I would even do that. And for many years, I felt like that was my lowest of lows. But my body was saying that there was a reaction to this that was very unsafe because I wasn't in agreement with it. I wasn't in my right mind to even make this decision. However, mentally, I was telling myself, like, look at this choice that you just made. Like, you just need to tuck away and not be around anyone because you can't even make healthy choices for you. And I wore that shame for the longest time until till Jesus set me free, right? I finally allowed him to help me unpack some of these traumas and my reactions to the traumas, which stemmed from me being a little girl, a 8-year-old little girl. It stemmed from that. And habitually, it just started reaffirming and reaffirming and reaffirming what was instilled in me as a child. And so by the time Maria got there, I was so isolated because I was shameful. I felt like I couldn't make healthy decisions. I didn't know what healthy people were. Like this thing just happened to me that I was like completely disgusted with, and I couldn't believe I even did it. Because I couldn't look at the fact that the person took advantage of me. And he that's what it is. He took advantage of me. He took advantage of the the fact that I wasn't in my right mind. I don't know if I drank too much. I don't know if something was put in my drink. I have no idea. I have no memory of it. But regardless of what it was an unsafe situation that I was in so much that it caused a reaction. And so when Maria came in, I just wanted my house safe for once in my life. I finally just started surrendering things to God because God would tell me for many years, you just need to surrender this. You need to surrender this. And I was like, Lord, I don't know what you're talking about when you tell me to surrender. What are you saying? What does this even mean? And for me in that season, it just meant to just slow down and just kind of stop and hunker down and pay attention to me, right? I had to pay attention to my feelings, my emotions, instead of just reacting to scenarios and reacting to situations. But at the same time, I was not healed yet, so I was completely disassociated from the traumas that had happened. And so when she came in and she would invite people over to our house, I literally felt like I was so exposed and vulnerable again, so much that I almost had a panic attack. Like, and I would lock myself in my room, just kind of freaking out internally because I did not know how to associate with people. And I remembered getting to that place where I felt like I was watching the world and I didn't know how to engage in the world. Not that we want to be of this world, but we're in this world, right? That's what it says. And so I didn't know how to engage. I didn't know how to have friendships. I didn't know how to have just normal conversations with people because I didn't know how to even open up. At that point, I was just completely closed off to everything, and I was so fearful of more trauma coming my way, more unhealthy people coming my way, something happening to my kids. I was just really living a life of anxiety and fear and isolation, but disassociation, and none of it really made sense because I could not connect to my trauma because I was so disassociated.
And that's normally what happens. So if you think about, like this woman and how if she was thinking if I could just touch his clothes, right? Her determination and her thinking. So like Heather, she was disassociated, but she got to this point in her life, and just like I got to this point in my life, that we wanted healing, right? We wanted to search for something. So we were going to like church, and we would go to these groups, and we would go to, the just healing, just any place. We were searching for somebody to tell us, like, we know there's a problem. God is telling us you have a problem. You have to learn to let this go. But there was no steps. We didn't have an idea of how to heal from something that we had never even, we just now figured out that there was a problem. So through life, we realize, like, yes, we have these coping mechanisms, but we don't know how to heal from them. We don't even know that we need to heal from them a lot of the times. But once we were going, like, probably every night of the week, there was some group or some woman's thing or something that we were going to try and connect, to get a step, or to try to figure out, how do I let this go, So you're going to the doctor's office like this woman was, you're going to the priest, you're going to all of that, and we were disappointed over and over and over again. And finally, we went to this one group, and I'm not going to put it out there, but we went to this one group, and everybody's sitting around, and I'm sitting there with my friend, and everyone's kind of sharing their day. And I'm like, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, these people are stuck in a victim state. They are benefiting from being in that state, whether it be attention, whether it be, that they're gaining something emotionally, and it could be feeding this I don't even know what you'd call it, this coping mechanism that you've created. And so I'm sitting there, and I don't want to be this. I don't want to sit in this victim state. I don't want to remain here. I want to heal and be healthy. I want to be able to move forward in my life and not carry this with me. And so as we're sitting there, and this woman's talking, and everybody's just kind of sitting, and she's done talking, I'm looking at around, and no one's giving her any guidance on how to deal with the situation that she's in. And I got so frustrated that I kind of just blew up at everybody. And I don't even remember what I said, but I kind of had a hot temper back then. And when I was frustrated, it would come out. Heather knows that. But even Heather was there, and I did super frustrated. I was like, nobody even tells us how to do this. Nobody, you all sit around here and you talk about how crappy your life is, and you talk about, your boyfriend's beating you up, and your kids are going crazy, and nobody's talking about any steps to fix it. We're just all sitting around talking about how crappy our life is. And I didn't want to be a part of that. I was searching for healing. I was searching for somebody to give me some kind of direction on where to go in my life, because I was sick of being stuck in this situation. And so I know, like, Heather was there, and I'm pretty sure she was shocked. Well, she's never shocked at what I do, because she knows me for a long time, and she knows I had a temper back then. And so, but when we left there, I was like, this is my frustration, because I'm always really open and honest with my friend. She knows everything about me. And so I was telling her, I was like, I'm so frustrated with this situation because we keep going to all of these counseling things and we go to these groups and nobody has anything for us. Nobody's given us any kind of steps to heal. And I want to heal. And so I'm going to take that healing on myself. So, like this woman, she was determined. She had a determination in her thinking. She wasn't casually interested in healing. She believed that Jesus was worth reaching out to. Sometimes when we approach healing like sometimes a lot of people do, like I'll change as long as it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable because of my needs. Or I'll heal as long as I don't have to be uncomfortable. That's another one. Our healing is going to make you uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable when you step into healing because you're dealing with stuff that you've been carrying for years. So sometimes you make excuses, and we all did. Even I've made hundreds of excuses to my friends of like why this is too hard. And she reminds me, which I think accountability partners in healing is absolutely amazing. But she reminds me, like, yes, you're going to be uncomfortable, but do you want to keep carrying this with you? So sometimes we have to be put ourselves in unfamiliar situations, but healing rarely works any other way. There may be things that we have to do that are uncomfortable. There may be things that we even have to grieve over. There may be relationships that we have to step back and reevaluate. Are they healthy for me? Is this person feeding me or is he taking something away from me or she? There may be behaviors that you have to stop using to numb yourself. For me, it was food. If I was stressed, if I was overwhelmed, if I didn't know what to do in my life, I would go to comfort foods and I would binge eat and then I would feel sorry for myself and tell myself you dummy, what'd you do again, and then I would beat myself up. So we have to learn not to go into those things that numb us. There may be some truths that you have to say about yourself and you have to unlearn those things. I have to unlearn that food is my comfort. I have to unlearn that being angry and shouting things out is not beneficial to me. I have to unlearn the negative things I say to myself when I'm looking in the mirror. Those are things that make you uncomfortable, and you have to learn to unlearn those things. There may be moments when you have to choose what God says over what your wounds have taught you. So, one of the most beautiful moments in this story happens after the woman touches Jesus's hem. And this is a part of this story that makes everything different for me. He could have shunned her. He could have said, "Get away from me." The crowd could have stoned her. They could have done a number of things. But this is the beautiful moment in it is that Jesus stopped. He stopped the noise. He stopped the crowd around him. He stopped all of their needs. He wasn't listening to any of these people's. He met her and noticed her. And that's what matters. So, in our moments when we are at our deepest, when we are at the point that we are searching, that is when Christ steps in and tells us, "You matter, and what you need matters to me." Apart from all of these people pushing in, wanting something from him, he stopped in that moment and said, "You are important." Because wounded people sometimes often believe that my needs aren't important or other people's wounds are worse than mine. And I can handle this myself. That was my biggest thing. I can handle this myself. I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. That is, everybody who knows me knows that that's what I say. Sometimes we even believe that you don't deserve that kind of attention. But Jesus stops. Your pain is not insignificant because someone else suffered differently. Your story does not have to be the worst story in the room before it deserves attention. You are allowed to bring your wounds to God. Jesus could have simply allowed her to disappear into the crowd after she was healed. He felt it. She touched his hem. He could have allowed her to disappear because immediately, as soon as she touched his hem, she was healed. She could feel the difference in her body. She was healed. And he could have just let it go. Instead, he calls her forward. Think of the fear in your mind when this whole crowd, they know who she is. They've called her by her infirmities. They know that she is to be put away. But instead, Jesus calls her forward into this crowd. And he says, daughter. Think about that. Her condition had been defined for 12 years of her life, just like everybody in your life. I know for me, the people that I grew up with and the people that I know, they used to say that I was mad and hateful and that I was all of these things, which was a condition because of the wounds that I carried for so long. Those were conditions. They weren't my identity. And so Christ did not call her a broken woman. He did not call her the sick woman. He did not call her unclean or damaged. He called her daughter. Healing isn't only about changing what happened to you. Sometimes healing is discovering who you are underneath everything that happened. Knowing that you're valuable, knowing that you are worthy, knowing that you are not the person that used to be, that you were actually called to be something else. You may have been called rejected or abandoned and unwanted and not enough or difficult or unlovable or even a failure. But God may be inviting you to stop introducing yourself by your wounds. Before your trauma, before your mistakes, before your failures, before what someone did to you, and before what someone called you, you are his daughter. Your healing requires participation. The woman didn't heal herself. Jesus was the source of her healing, but she had to participate. She heard, she believed, she moved, she reached. There are important balances here. We cannot control every outcome, and faith is not guaranteed that every physical or emotional struggle disappears immediately. But we can choose whether we participate in healing work in us, in front of us. We can pray and go to counseling. We can trust God and establish boundaries. You can forgive someone and decide they no longer have access to you. That is okay. You can believe God is healing you and examine your unhealthy patterns. That one spoke out the most to me because I remember praying so hard, Lord, please take this away from me. Please take this thing that I'm holding on to away from me. I know I have other things I have to work on, but this one is holding me from what I feel like I'm destined to do. Please take it away. And he had to show me that I have an unhealthy pattern I have to fix first. So we have a responsibility to participate in our healing. You can have faith and admit you're struggling, and you can surrender something to God and make practical changes. Faith isn't always standing still waiting for something to happen. Sometimes faith looks like pushing through the crowd. So what are you willing to fight through? Maybe your crowd is fear. Maybe your crowd is shame. Maybe it's even the opinion of others. Maybe your crowd is the voice that you say to yourself, never, nothing will ever change. Maybe it's the things that you say to yourself when you're in there. There's a lot of things that happen that you say. Maybe you're tired before, maybe you've tried before and failed. I don't even know how many diets I've been on that I've tried and nothing ever worked. Maybe healing requires having a conversation that you've avoided. I know for my friend that has happened to her, and I can tell you the difference between before she had that conversation versus after that conversation and how that has changed her life dramatically in her healing process. Maybe it means finally saying that, yes, I'm hurt. I need healing. I am dying over here inside. I know that I put this face on the outside, but internally I'm struggling. Maybe it just means saying no. Maybe it means asking for help and admitting that I cannot keep living like this. Not because healing is easy. No one ever says healing is easy. It requires a lot of participation and a lot of you. But because staying wounded doesn't simply mean you don't want to stay in this wounded state. Nobody wants to stay there. And it might make you uncomfortable. But what cost do you have by not healing? What is it going to cost you to stay in this hurt? Is it going to cost you where God has you? Is it going to take you away from the purpose that He has for you because you're holding on to these old hurts? So when we think about like this woman, that's why this story is so important to me, is because it reminds me on a daily basis that I have to participate in the healing process. It reminded me, and I was telling Heather this morning, it gave me this fire to fight because I knew what the battle was at this moment. Before I didn't know, I just knew I needed this healing and I didn't know what the steps were to take to get there. And now that I understand what the battle is, it almost changes your mindset. And Heather can talk about that too because she's watched me struggle through this. I've watched her struggle through this. So I'll let her talk a little bit because I'm probably long-winded. So we'll see what she has to say.
Um, so yeah, I have definitely witnessed Maria battling with this on and off over the years. And I also um watched her overcome it and really fight for herself. And I think so I'm going to speak to this from a perspective of being a sexual assault victim, and actually the two different sides to it. So we both were as young children, and throughout our childhoods, and then we had unhealthy things later on after our childhood. And what Maria did was she did turn to food as her comfort, but it also gave her a level of protection. So that way, in her mind, she was no longer desirable, and it would no longer make her d wanted, right? She would no longer be a victim. And so she did it to protect herself. But then that protection later on turned to bondage. So, yes, it brought her comfort. Yes, it was the one thing that she could control growing up, but she also did it in hopes to kind of disappear, right? And so we talked about me going through the phase of isolating, and I kind of made myself disappear, and she did it like she wanted to disappear in the midst of a crowded room. And on the flip side, me growing up, I did not turn to food as comfort. I turned to people pleasing. That was a thing. And I remembered, you know, I hate speaking on this, but it's the truth, and it'll resonate with those who it needs to resonate with. But I felt like people just wanted me for my body for the longest time, and even the ones that claimed to love me. It was all about my body and it was about my image. And I got to where I didn't want to be that anymore. I wanted someone to see my heart because I knew that I had a good heart. Yes, I was a little messed up. Yes, I needed to heal, but I had a great heart. And I just wanted people to notice that. I didn't want it to be about, what looks good on me and what doesn't look good on me and my appearance. And I felt like for the longest time they were identifying that was my identity. My looks was my identity. And Maria did not want her looks to be her identity. She did not want the attention. And it wasn't that I did want the attention because I didn't, but it was what was pointed out. And so that's why I started isolating. Like I didn't trust anyone. Um, and so yeah, just watching the two journeys come together has been absolutely amazing. And I went to counseling on and off for so many years. But then there was this part of me as well because I didn't trust people. I didn't know who was healthy, who wasn't healthy, how to discern whether or not they were truly sympathetic or not. Um, I had a hard time connecting, number one, emotionally to my story. But number two, I felt like, well, who are you to sit here and listen to my story? You have no idea what this is even like. You don't know what it's like to battle with continuous stuff that just won't stop. And so I couldn't let that guard down, and I did not know how to let the guard down. And so taking it back to how amazing accountability is, I got certified as a life coach like 4 years ago. And the reason why I did was because I knew the power behind it when my friend and I went through our healing process together. I was like, to have a person that could understand what it was like for me to be able to fully open up because she knows what it is like. That made it so much easier for me. And then for me to hear her story and me to feel bad for her, like it would hurt my heart to hear about her story, that also allowed me to connect to my own trauma. And that is what I was needing. And so there is power in support groups. There is power in groups to in general, and anything that you are trying to build and grow through, there is power in having someone like a life coach, for instance, to be able to talk to that they've been through this. That's why that is the difference between a life coach and like a counselor or a psychiatrist or anything else, is they often are speaking from experience. And so her and I sharing our stories together and being able to be completely honest with one another and honest with love, because love and honesty do go hand in hand, but we have to make sure that the person that we're entrusting that with is a trustworthy person. And that is what we built together. And God showed us how we could trust one another, which eventually led to us being able to have like romantic relationships and getting married and discerning whether or not that was healthy, because God used the two of us to grow ourselves, to learn how to trust, to learn how to love, to learn how to put the other person first, to learn how to hold each other's hand through the fire, right? Because we had many fires we were walking through. And even though our struggles and our manifestations of our traumas might have been a little bit different, the root of it was quite similar. And so I think even when you start going through this healing process, we tend to look at another person and we think, oh man, only if I could look at it like this, or maybe I wish I would have had a struggle like that. And we start comparing ourselves instead of like actually realizing the root cause, the reason why all of us are struggling is because of this trauma that happened when we were kids or when we were young adults, or whenever the trauma happened. We have a common denominator, we have a common source. And so yeah, I don't know, I think this is amazing. I think what you're building here is amazing with Mad Healing. And it's empowering to know someone who is a strong woman, right? A strong, successful woman. And they've been through hell and back so many times. And then you see them taking their talents, taking their testimony and reinvesting it into another woman who might be struggling because they can't figure out how to get through it. They can't figure out how to get themselves out of the mud pit, out of the trenches, because sometimes for a minute we're kind of in the trenches and we're kind of feeling sorry for ourselves, but yet we're fighting so hard to get out, but we keep slipping back down into the trenches, right? We keep getting reminded of how dirty and shameful we are. We keep getting reminded of how discarded we were. And so coming together as a unity, as women together to really embrace and support one another, that is beautiful. That is when Christ would look at us and say, "You are my daughters," right? You are my daughters. And what better way to take the power from the things that were meant to destroy you in life, because they were sent to destroy you, because the enemy is a deceiver and he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. God is not the source of our pain, right? That people have free will. They choose to be creeps. They choose to be jerks. But if you could take your story and share it with another person and see it be fruitful and multiply, then it almost makes you proud of the life that you've been through. I've had a lot of pain in my life. And just like we were talking about yesterday, if you could change your past, would you change it? I wouldn't. There's nothing I would change about my past because I am who I am today because of my past. I chose not to stay stuck in the mud and in the pit, but I have the ability to relate to so many different things. I have the wisdom around it. Lord, how can I multiply this thing that was meant to take from me? So instead of looking at it as a loss, I can look at it as a gain. And so, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So, we have this channel that Heather's got, and it's amazing. So go check it out. It's Kingdom Economic Builders. You will find our Mad Healing under there. We are still working on all of it. We're getting ready to launch a 12-week course into healing. So make sure you're there to check that out. But yeah, so if you want a group that gets together, that talks and empowers one another and things like that, we meet up twice a week just to talk about healing. There'll be links in there that if you're interested in joining the 12-week healing process, that'll be available as well. So for closing, I want to go back to the woman and to go off of what Heather was saying. So for 12 years, this woman carried something that she could not have fixed herself. Think about how long that you've carried your own personal wounds. Think about how long you've carried these into this life that you're trying to just barely survive. Think about how long you've had to carry this weight. But when she heard that Jesus was near, she moved towards him. The crowd didn't get the final say. Your crowds don't get a final say over your life. They don't get to dictate your healing. They don't get to dictate anything. You do. Her past attempts didn't get the final say. Her fear didn't get the final words. Her fear didn't get to hold her back anymore. She reached and Jesus stopped for her. There may be crowds between where you are and where you want to be. There may be fear. There may be guilt. There may be uncomfortable truths. But there may be even difficult choices that you'll have to make. But you do not have to build your home in a place where you were wounded. So go after your healing. Take the next step. Push through that crowd and reach for Christ. And when the journey becomes difficult, remember the name he gave the woman who came trembling before him. Daughter, your wounds may explain part of your story, but they do not get to name you. So I want to thank you guys for joining on and hopping on here to our Mad Healing. This is one of our first videos that's going to be posted to this YouTube channel. We'll be doing this every week on Wednesday morning, so make sure you jump on and join us. Heather, again, thank you for Kingdom Economic Builders. It's a great place. If you are interested and joining, we'll put the link for the Kingdom Economics in the chat. So Heather, if you want to do that, we can link it up there. It's a great community of some amazing people that have a God-given gift to just lift you up, to bring you into a group of like-minded individuals that have the same struggles that we do, but they are there to build you up and not tear you down. It's a great place if you're interested in having a platform to even to do your own life coaching on, or your own videos or whatever. It's a great, we call it the mall. So she has lots of different little shops in there that she can set up for you. So it's a great platform with great people that inspire one another, that support one another, that drive traffic. So make sure you come check it out. She'll put the link in the chat. Thank you again, Heather, for coming. And for being my friend and doing this crazy bit with us. A little history, when we walked out of that last group, when I lost my temper, we actually come up with this plan of 12 weeks of healing 13 years ago, the day that we walked out of there. And it took us 13 years to get here. It took us 13 years to figure out what we needed to do. And healing is a journey, but it's worth the journey. It's worth being healthy and successful in who you are and not have to carry this bondage with you anymore. So 13 years ago, we come up with this crazy idea that we were going to do this. We even went and bought 12 binders because we were going to do a 12-week class, and now it's here. So 13 years later, we finally got to the point that we've healed enough, that we went through enough, that God kind of just give us the steps on how to do this, and here we are. And so, if we can do it, and all of the mess up things that we've gone through, and all of the disgrace, and all of the people telling us you're never going to amount to nothing, you're always going to be this. Well, here we are. God has used our own pain and our own suffering so that we can continue to go in the path that He has. And how empowering is it when you can give another woman the ability to step forward and take her power back? So with that, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and go check out Kingdom Economic Builders. It's an amazing place. See you later.
Bye.